buy some. I was going to go to the dollar store, but I didn't want to take a chance. Anyway, our guest today is Michelle Matthews, and her topic is 1 year, 100 stories, how this feature writer gets it done, or as they say in the South, get her done. Right? Since her first book was published at age 6 by her biggest fan, which was her grandmother, Michelle Matthews intended to become a writer. A native Mobilian, she earned a degree in English literature and creative writing from Agnes Scott College in Atlanta, where she was the editor of The Profile, the biweekly student newspaper. She has made a living through writing for the past 27 years. Congratulations on that. Since 2013, she has written features for AL.com, the news website for the Press Register, Birmingham News, and Huntsville Times. In her current role, she finds stories about people, places, and food from around the state for This Is Alabama, an emerging brand from Alabama Media Group. Now settled into a routine of publishing 2 stories per week, she writes some 100 stories per year. She has won 2 awards for the Best Feature Story from the Alabama Associated Press Managing Editors Contest, and her work receives millions of page views per year. So let's give a warm Pensters welcome to Michelle.
I cannot tell you all how much my hands are sweating and my heart is pounding. As nice as you all seem, and I felt very jealous when everyone was talking about their books. And I had forgotten about the book I wrote when I was 6, the only one I have ever managed to write. And I was thinking, like, wow, I'm just so impressed with authors, and several of the people I've written about have been writers, and I might tell you a little bit about some of those. But as we were sitting there, Shannon Brown leans over and says, "Have you written a book, Michelle?" I was like, "No, I have not, but I'm a little bit busy writing other things." But I really do admire all of you, and I do feel that you're kindred spirits. So I shouldn't be so nervous. Usually, though, in my job, I never face a group like this. I'm at home interviewing people on the phone, or when I'm lucky in person. That's my favorite thing to do, of course. My job has evolved a lot over the years, and I won't even get into any of that unless you want to know specifically. But I thought today I would really just talk about what I do now. The people, places, and food. And I write about topics all over the state, which it's good and bad for me, because Mobile and Baldwin County, Mobile is what I know, that's where I'm from, where I live, and it's frustrating not to be able to follow up on all of the great stories that are here. I have to think in terms of balancing the whole state. I can't think of covering the whole state. I can't do that, but at least finding good stories from throughout the state, which has been wonderful lately. My new passion is small towns, and so I've gotten to spend time in places I've never been, or only, I've seen the signs on the interstate for Bruton and Andalusia and Greensboro and Greenville and just Coleman. Not Coleman. Camden. I love Camden. But I wanted to tell you guys first about a story that I didn't get to do, that I really regret. And it's sort of, I don't even know why I'm telling you, but I think the reason I'm telling you this is that the last time I had to do this to a much smaller group was in February, and I was really nervous about it. And I had told there was a person who, a young woman, we had been texting for weeks at that point. And this was on a day, the day I was to speak, was a day that we had tentatively planned to finally get together and do her story. And I had to say to her, I'm sorry, I have to go speak to a group of people. I never do this, and I'm so nervous. And she sent me, in a text, sort of a meme, a picture of a goldfish, this goldfish swimming right below the surface of the water, with a shark fin strapped to its back. So above the water, it looked like a tough shark. And it said, be brave, even if you're not, pretend to be. And it touched me, and I'll tell you why when you hear about her. But it really did give me the courage to stand up in front of that group. And I think thinking about that made me go back and look at our text. And this young woman, her name, this is not her real name, but I'm going to call her Lisa to protect her privacy, but she was someone I met at the yoga studio I used to go to. And she was at the front desk, just, one of those people with a great smile who makes you feel welcome, who's very, just one of those really, just great people. You can tell they're a wonderful person who wants to serve. She's there picking up everyone's blocks and everything after class. If someone came in late, she would roll out a mat for them. She was just this wonderful young woman who was painfully thin. I mean, a lot of yoga, not me obviously, but a lot of yoga people are very thin and small, but this woman was really skeletal. And so to me, obviously, she had an eating disorder, but I never would have talked to her about it. Well, I stopped going to the yoga studio, and probably a year later, I get a text out of the blue from Lisa. I didn't even know she had my cell phone number. And she wrote, she greeted me first, but then she said, I'm in the terminal stages of anorexia. I didn't even know there was a terminal stage of anorexia. I didn't know that was something that one would be aware of. We've been given this gift of time together, and my family is doing everything they can to make it wonderful. I don't know how long I have or what's to happen next, but I've been privileged to see some of the stories you've done on remarkable people, and if you ever need one, please look to my family. My 20-year struggle with my eating disorder has not just affected me, but all my family, and now that we can talk about it, we want to inspire others to be able to do the same. And so I was just knocked over, and I thought, I have to do this. I mean, I will absolutely write about Lisa. So we started making plans, and then really weeks would go by. We would kind of say, okay, how about Wednesday morning? Yeah, that sounds good. I didn't even know where she lived. But she had gotten to the point where almost any activity just wore her out. And the idea of sitting and talking to me for a while, I think she knew it was, she really had to be geared up for that. And so but I was still determined, and we kept on. This was in January when she had first contacted me. And she would tell me things like this: honoring my family any way I can while I'm still here is what's important to me. And giving a voice to those who are still living in the shame of their disorder and their families who just wants to help them is what keeps me going. There have been some rough days recently, which makes me even more motivated to be able to tell you the story of my family and friends and the journey we're all on together. I'm so grateful, and I feel so blessed. This dying woman feels blessed. Another day she wrote, so looking forward to visiting. It will give me something to get up for tomorrow. We still didn't meet. And then another time she wrote, I really hope that sharing our story will help others, and to recognize my family and how amazing they are. She did not want the focus to be on her, which of course I would have made it. And I would have certainly talked about her family, but I never got the chance. She died on April 12th, and I never got to tell her story. She was only 36 years old. But what I regret is I'm not a really pushy person. I'm not like a lot of that's probably why I'm not a news reporter or an investigative reporter. I'm not in your face, but maybe I'm a little too passive, because really, who goes on for 4 months texting with someone and doesn't just say, where do you live? I'm coming there now. And I wish I had. But there are lots of other stories that I have gotten to, and I'm sorry to start with that sad tale. But in fact, I said I wasn't going to talk about what I used to do, but I think one of the kind of a funny thing, when I started writing for the Press Register and AL.com, right after the whole transition to digital in 2012. I actually started working there in 2013 after being laid off. I was one of the editors laid off at the paper and then rehired, and that's a whole other story. But when I started back there as a writer instead of an editor, I had a friend, Carol McPhail, who had been the religion editor at the paper, and Carol was, one of the things she had to do every week was called Life Stories. And she had to tell someone, those were basically extended obits. And I thought, oh, poor Carol, I cannot imagine doing that. I hate the whole idea. Just terrible. So about a month later, who do you think had to start writing them? Me. So Carol and I alternated the life stories for a couple of years, and that ended up being one of the best things I've done, because those were profiles of people I never met, never could meet, but tried to pull together a story, well, certainly stories from family members who were usually still grieving, and I felt honored to do that. And I always felt when I was writing those like that person was looking over my shoulder, and I really wanted them to approve. And I'm very proud of all of those that I wrote. But I used to have to say, I would tell my mom, gotta find a dead person this week. But to find, that's awful, I know, but to find them, of course I would read the paid obituaries, and I would, as I do for a lot of my ideas, I look on Facebook and social media for stories. I found lots of good dead people, good stories, good, good, interesting people that way. There are so many, some of the kind of things that have led to what I do now. Like, I think that really helped me develop my skills profiling people, and that's one of the things I still write about. And even when I write about restaurants, food, and places, I try to find a person connected with that and tell the story that way. I kind of have a reputation for writing about inspirational stories, people who have a young man who was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer 10 years ago, who is still alive and thriving, and raised money to build a playground at his church. And a woman who was in the Birmingham area looking for a kidney for her husband, and I'm almost positive that through the story being shared so much, they did find a kidney for him. And that's like, wow, I had a little tiny something to do with that. That's amazing. What a privilege. I have written a lot about lost dogs being found for some reason. So I have several of those stories in my repertoire. Older people, I have written about 70th wedding anniversaries, and recently I wrote about the oldest living Auburn cheerleader, who was delightful. I've written about the oldest living Alabama football player, and I loved him too. That was fun, and honestly can't even remember, but a lot. The oldest barber, an old man who was still, I think when he died he had turned 98, but when I interviewed him he was like 95 or 96 and still coming to work every day. Started a barber college in Mobile, and just a really neat guy. I am not.
You just turned 100.
You're kidding me.
I wrote that.
I'll talk to you later. But I've done this for such a long time, really, even before I worked for, I worked for a time, before my children were born, I was the editor of Mobile Bay Monthly magazine in the late 90s. And one of the last stories I wrote before I left there to have a child, and I was pregnant, and I went to the home of the sweetest young couple whose last name is Zimlick in Mobile, and they had 5 babies at once. So I wrote about the Zimlick quintuplets celebrating their first birthday. And I just remember I was so, I was so overwhelmed, and I was there all morning, and I thought, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this, but I didn't have to do that, thank God, but I didn't have 5, but at once. But they just really stuck with me. Also, I had not eaten before I got there, and so I felt awful, but anyway. So that was I think that was the cover of the kids celebrating. We had a big birthday cake from Pullman's, and the kids were around, and that was on the cover of the magazine in 2000. And I started thinking about them last year and wondering whatever happened to those kids. And so I found them. It wasn't that hard, well, it kind of was actually, because they had been homeschooled. And so I finally tracked them down, and they were starting, all 5 of them had gotten a scholarship that had been promised to them when they were babies to South Alabama. And so that was so surreal that, like, I guess 17 years later, I show up in a different house, those same children who are now, just about the age of my son, basically, or they're a little bit older. But that was really neat and surreal and made me feel really old. but that was fun. And so what I do now is really nothing, no breaking news or anything like that. They're kind of evergreen stories. And I do write 2 of them a week. They're planned pretty much in advance. I have my editor, and she, things have changed so much. They don't really call them editors anymore. She's a managing producer, I think, but she's still of AL.com. She's my editor, and she lives in North Alabama, and so we communicate via email and sometimes phone calls. But she has a Google Calendar for me, and she has all my stories on there. And so it's kind of a group effort to come up with the things I write about. I come up with them, and she approves them or not, and adds some things that she wants me to do. And the stories just come from all over the place. And it's sometimes hard for me, like during the week when I'm focusing on my 2 stories that I'm working on, that's all I think about. I mean, in addition to my personal life, I'm focused on those 2 stories, and drive my husband crazy talking about every aspect of what I'm working on. Then the next week, I'm on to the next thing. And so after a while, it's just a blur. And so when I was preparing for this, I looked at, I can go to AL.com. There's a certain place where I can look back at the list of everything I've done, and I usually think, well, I just write, these little things. But I look back and I think, oh my God, like I have quite a body of work here, and I'm proud of it, because that anything with your name on it, everything I do has my name on it. So I want it to be good, and not just for me, but for the people I'm writing for. And I'm not doing PR for anyone or advertising for anyone, but it's important to me that the people I write about are happy with what I've done. And usually, thank God, they are. I've made so many friends on Facebook. Sonia, after after writing about people, and that's just wonderful to me. The actual, once I have a story, so I told you I've got my calendar, and so I will make contact with the person, which sometimes is easier than other times. It can be, especially when people are outside of this area. It can be hard to find. And sometimes they live in places where they're not even familiar with these 3 newspapers. They don't get them in their area. So, and there's that too. People wonder, like, what is AL.com? What is this? What is AL.com? And so I have to explain it to them. And sometimes they're just kind of amazed, because you really wouldn't believe how far these stories go, how much people share them on social media, and it's really amazing. And I'm not bragging, but it's like it's just really a neat thing to see how far things go. And one of my goals in life, I've worked for magazines, and I always wanted to write for Southern Living, and I've actually had writers for Southern Living have aggregated things I've written. And then it's funny because someone might have shared something I've written like, oh neat, this is great. And then Southern Living basically copies what not copied. No, now if they write their own story, that's a different thing. But when they aggregate, they might have a link to my story and then they've kind of summarized. They haven't done any legwork at all. They've basically seen what I've done. And so I followed, there's this one particular writer with I think she's southernliving.com, not she doesn't really work for the print magazine, but she had shared several of my stories like that, and then people are so impressed, oh, Southern Living, wow, we're in Southern Living. And so I looked her up, and she's like maybe 30 years old, and she lives in New York City, and she's not even from the South. But anyway, but I'm flattered that she would pick up on some of the things I've written, and Garden and Gun was the same way, and that I really like that magazine too, and I did a story about Drexel and honeybees in Bruton, which is a kind of paid, not kind of, it's definitely donation-only restaurant where people pay what they can and have a really nice lunch. And the woman who runs it sent me a message and said, wow, somebody sent me a link and said that your story was in Garden and Gun. I was like, no, not my story's not in Garden and Gun. And she sent me a link, and they had done the same thing, like aggregated for, not for the print magazine, but for their website. But, you know, so I told y'all that I do interviews on the phone, or I go to people, and sometimes they're really shocked when I show up with my notebook. These are all over my house, all over. Like, I have hundreds of these. I show up with this in my pen, and, you know, now most of my younger colleagues would never even think to do that. They have a recorder, or they use their phone, and I cannot trust that. I can't. So I can write very quickly, and luckily I've never had anyone, I really have never had anyone say, you misquoted me. So I feel lucky for that. But, so I take my notes, and I do my homework on, you know, online. Like, not long ago, I interviewed a man in Montgomery who is a golf instructor, and he had all three of his children are, you know, they're all young, but they're up-and-coming golfers. I know nothing about golf. And he was naming all these different people they admire and different tournaments they've been in, and I was like, oh my God. So just writing, like, phonetically, whatever. And so after that, you have to go back and look up. Yeah, Google is my friend. And try to piece these things together. And so I'm also a terrible procrastinator. Maybe y'all have that cursor on the blank screen is just torments me. And I think it's because I'm not very good at writing drafts. As I'm writing, I'm backspacing and trying to get it perfect as I go. And so I'm trying to let that go a little bit, because I have a, you know, I know when my deadline is to turn something in. I know when it's going to publish online. And so I have a little time in between from when my editor sees it. She doesn't seem to notice that I go back and tweak it and change it around before I've been happy with it to post. As long as she's seen it and she knows I've done the work, we're good. But, you know, like y'all, I kind of have some, like you probably have, I have some rituals. I usually work at